This is our 5th time.
I wouldn't have dreamt of what I learned here.
This encourages you and inspires you, and it's so relaxing, and the food is great.
I love Retreat at Sea, and I will do it again.
And you should be here.
Holy Trinity is at work full time here.
Rome Dispatch, all the way back in July, predicted that Cardinal Fernandez would institute blessings for same-sex couples. Now, we are predicting he will be extending Holy Communion to same-sex couples. Join us with the latest from the Eternal City, Church Militant's Rome correspondent, Dr. Jules Gomes. Jules, all the way back in July, you, me, were talking on Rome Dispatch about how the man Pope Francis picked to head the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith, Victor Emmanuel Fernandez, would himself pave the way for the blessings of same-sex couples. And here we are. But for the sake of viewers who need that fact-checked, let's roll that tape. Archbishop Victor Emmanuel Fernandez, the man Pope Francis picked to head the DDF starting in September, seems hell-bent on approving blessings for same-sex couples, something the same dicastery in 2021 reaffirmed was impossible. Okay, that was a little blast from the past there, Jules. And the reason we're reporting on that is because you found that out in your time at with all the people you talked to and everything. So we talked about on Rome Dispatch. Now, Jules, just off the cuff, what is your prediction without backing it up yet? What's your prediction regarding where all this is going? Same-sex blessings. Are we done yet with same-sex couples?
The trajectory has been set, Brad, and Fernandez has embarked on what is proving to be a very slippery slope. Of course, it's deliberate, it's intentional, it's planned, it's carefully orchestrated and calibrated. And my prediction is that very soon we are going to see a new document from the Dicastery for the Doctrine for the Faith, green-lighting Holy Communion for same-sex couples who are cohabiting.
Okay, so a lot of people out there probably ready to stoke the fire and put you on it for being a heretic, saying that's you can't have that, or else Holy Mother Church is erred or whatever. So we're going to go there on this pretty bold prediction. I haven't seen this out there with other people. What's your reasons, Jules, for making such a bold prediction? A prediction that many would actually think would be impossible to fulfill.
Well, Brad, I've spent years fighting this agenda in the Church of England, and I know from my sources who are close to Pope Francis and to Justin Welby that this is a playbook that he's taken straight out of, the Anglican Communion. And this is precisely how the Church of England, slowly catching monkey, as we say in England, made its moves. Now, it's important to remember that as Fernandez hinted a number of times in several interviews before he was actually appointed, that this is going to come to pass. He is also laying the ground, both he and Pope Francis. One very glaring example of this is, for example, in response to the question posed by the Czech Cardinal Dominic Duka a couple of months ago. He said that Holy Communion could be given to those in irregular unions who may or may not be living chastely, successfully. So let me give you the exact quote. This is Fernandez's quote. He said, Pope Francis maintains the proposal of full continence for the divorced and remarried in a new union, but admits that there may be some difficulties in practice. Therefore, he allows, in some cases, after adequate discernment, the administration of the sacrament of reconciliation, even when one fails to be faithful to the continence proposed endorsed by the church. So you see, there's always this business of holiness or continence being an ideal, and a lot of people cannot live up to that ideal. So let's drop the ideal and make exceptions. And soon, as we know with communion in the hand, of course, exceptions become the rule.
So now what he's harking back to, Familiaris Consortio from John Paul II said, I was like paragraph 86 or so, 84, that if a couple can't separate, first of all, because there's the occasion of sin, right? And if a couple can't separate, maybe they have children or whatever, there's some serious reason why they can't separate. They came to it after many years, figuring, oh, we're living in sin, we need to rectify this. And then they pledge firmly to live as brother and sister. And, of course, if they fail in that firm resolution to live chastely, do go and make a sincere confession with a firm purpose of amendment, then they can receive. Now, it seems like they're applying that to the irregular unions there recently with the latest response back in October. But let's move on then. If that's, one data point, what's the next thing you're looking at?
Brad, the other thing that we need to consider is the proliferation of so-called LGBTQ masses all across the Western Catholic world. And these masses have the explicit endorsement of their, ordinary bishop or archbishop. We know, for example, in the Westminster Diocese in England, the so-called Soho masses have been going on for decades, and not once is there any mention of, living in chastity or the fact that homosexual practice is a sin. And not once is there mention that, yes, we love LGBTQ people, if there is such a category. We want people of every kind to come in, but we want you to live according to the standards that God sets for all of us. So the kind of pressure on these people have been putting pressure, and now it is very obvious that they have been receiving communion, and priests who celebrate these masses have been giving Holy Communion to couples living, in sin. The euphemism is irregular unions. And that is yet another dimension to this pressure building up on Fernandez and the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith to simply normalize what has always been practiced, or rather what is being practiced. I remember listening to one of India's most famous theologians, Father Paul Puthanangari, a Salesian, who was giving us a lecture at the National Biblical, Catechetical and Liturgical Center in Bangalore, and he was walking up and down the podium and shouting, and he was saying, we need a revolution, and the revolution comes by people, clergy, laity breaking Rome's law at the grassroots level, so that more people break these laws. Then there will, of course, a time come when the Vatican changes its laws to conform with this revolution. And this is the kind of mentality that has pervaded the progressive quarters of the church.
Now, Jules, I'm just recently, the Fernandez came out with a kind of an odd document on communion to unwed mothers, and the unwed mothers, we didn't even cover that on Rome Dispatch, because it's like, well, who doesn't, they're not living in an objective state of sin necessarily. They're not evidencing anything like that. So I didn't even know who doesn't give, communion to. And I guess somebody down in South America had a problem with it, but it seems like a very local problem, should have been handled with the bishop. Why do you think Fernandez would have come out with that now, saying, oh, and you got to make sure you give communion to the unwed mothers?
Well, I have a very strong suspicion that this is yet another precursor to communion for same-sex couples. Because as you rightly said, Brad, we didn't do a Rome Dispatch on it, and everybody, around the world shrugged their shoulders and said, are there really parts of the world today in the 21st century where a priest does not give, Holy Communion to a woman just because she's an unwed mother? Of course not. You must also remember that there is another thing going to be introduced, Brad, that there will be this, caveat put in that, it's okay if we give Holy Communion to same-sex couples as long as we assume they're living a celibate relationship. And this fig leaf of celibacy, we still laugh at it in the Church of England. This was used so often, and everybody knew that, it was total humbug. But again, if you want to change church doctrine and practice, these are some of the ways you do it.
So now, Jules, we're at the point where this latest declaration by Fernandez really kind of came out of nowhere. There was no dubia on it. It was just his own putting this out there. And, it says, quote, the possibility of blessing couples in irregular unions and same-sex couples. It put those two, tied them together right there. Do you think that was intentional and kind of laying more groundwork as we're moving forward here?
Absolutely. That is why I used the word precursor. Then what they will do, this is how they're trying to create the impression of development of doctrine, Brad. As we know, Fiducia Supplicans quotes almost entirely Francis's own writings. And when they introduced the new document, when they published the new document on giving Holy Communion to couples, same-sex couples, they will then quote this. They're putting the paperwork, they're stacking the deck, as it were, with so-called preparatory magisterial documents. You're absolutely right.
Now, Jules, you're saying some people are going to abuse this, most people may, saying, we're, tongue-in-cheek, we're living chastely or whatever. So, they're going to be in mortal sin. And, and is that even a big deal to a lot of pastors today? There is the question of giving Holy Communion to pro-abort politicians. Last year, there was a big dust-up. Many see Pope Francis really open to giving Holy Communion, basically to everybody, as he said, even if it's pro-abort politician. Do you believe that's true?
Well, you've put your finger on it, Brad, because that is yet another bit of evidence. It all fits together very neatly, doesn't it? That Pope Francis not once has condemned giving communion to politicians who are virtually demanding the murder of children, right to the moment of birth. And President Joe Biden is one of those, and Nancy Pelosi is another. So again, this business of condoning is going to be formalized, and the pieces are just falling in place. I don't see how this cannot but come to pass.
So, Jules, how do you expect all this is going to play out in the near future? Do you expect it right away? Do you want to let the dust settle a little bit here on this latest declaration? Is it going to be before the next synod, as these all seem to be, these dubia seem to be popping out right before the last synod? What's the timeline here?
I suspect it will not be now, of course. It will be sometime during the fall, before the next session of the Synod on Synodality. Now, there is one thing that may spike the whole thing, and I think Fernandez and Pope Francis did not expect the level, the extent of blowback they would get from Africa. And again, parallel with the Anglican Communion, massive blowback has come from the African bishops. Now, if this blowback continues to intensify, Pope Francis and Fernandez are going to be pushed against a wall. And in that case, communion for same-sex couples will have to be shelved. But if the blowback peters out, then, I predict a fall date for this new document.
Yeah, of course, it'll all be preceded by, in certain cases and, and all this type of stuff, and only not everywhere and all, but then it may become widespread. So even though something can be done without breaking church teaching, such as possibly giving communion to those in irregular unions, as John Paul II was talking about, with the many stipulations that he had in place, opening that up to same-sex couples would seem a gross violation of pastoral prudence. Could it possibly be done without scandal or sacrilege in some cases? Maybe. Both pledging to live chastely and can't separate because of convalescence or something, and go to confession if they violate it. I don't know. But will it be grossly violated and endanger the salvation of many owing to scandal and sacrilege? Sacrilegious communion? Most definitely. So please pray for our church leaders that true mercy is not replaced by some form of false mercy. And Jules, thank you so much for the insights, and we'll see if your prediction comes true.
Thank you, Brad.
Thanks again for watching today's episode of Rome Dispatch. This show is brought to you by donors like Real Estate for Life. If you're looking to buy or sell a home and want to support our mission, visit realestateforlife.org. Again, that's realestateforlife.org. Be sure to tell them Church Militant sent you. God bless.